Great, thank you, Shannon. And now I will, perfect. Now I will turn things over to Teddy Horvitz, I will turn things over to Teddy Horvitz to open the webinar and introduce our speaker. So Teddy, go ahead and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hi, can everybody hear me? Shake your head, nod your head. Great. Well, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar, Partnering with our National Voter Registration Day. My name is Teddy Horvitz and I'm the president of NCJW Pittsburgh. Today's call is part of the NCJW's Promote the Vote, Protect the Vote initiative. For decades, NCJW members and supporters have encouraged civic engagement by registering voters, educating communities, protecting voting rights, and getting out the vote on Election Day. 54 years ago today, President Lyndon Johnson signed the 1965 Voting Rights Act into law. The Voting Rights Act was one of the most successful civil rights law of all time until it was gutted by a Supreme Court ruling in 2013. However, today is still an auspicious day to talk about the importance of registering people to vote. Every year, millions of Americans find themselves unable to vote because they miss a registration deadline, don't update their registration, or aren't sure how to register. National Voter Registration Day is the only holiday devoted to registering all eligible citizens to vote. Held on the fourth Tuesday of September, this year, National Voter Registration Day falls on September 24th. I'm pleased today to welcome Caitlin Donnelly, Education and Engagement Coordinator for Nonprofit Vote, to our webinar. Caitlin manages Nonprofit Vote's popular monthly webinar series and builds the capacity of organizational partners to deepen their levels of voter engagement. Today, Caitlin will share tools, resources, and ideas for voter registration, and will explain why partnering with National Voter Registration Day can be an asset to your section, whether you've registered voters for decades or are new to the work. After Caitlin's presentation, we'll open up the lines for Q&A, and I encourage you all to type your questions into the chat box as we go as well. After Q&A, I'll close out the webinar with a call to action. Remember, NCJW is a 501c3 tax-exempt organization. NCJW members can and should engage in civic engagement and get out the vote efforts, but you cannot tell people to vote for a specific ideology or political candidate or party. That's very important to remember. Now I'm going to turn the webinar over to Caitlin Donnelly, Education and Engagement Coordinator at Nonprofit Vote.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for that introduction. I am going to share my screen and take you all through a few slides I've prepared. So let's do that. All right. So will folks nod their heads if you can see my slide that says about Nonprofit Vote? Oh, perfect. Okay, so I just want to start with talking a little bit about what Nonprofit Vote is. I am the Education Director for Nonprofit Vote. We were founded in 2005 to partner with nonprofits, 501c3s in particular, to help the people they serve participate and vote. And so we are the leading source of nonpartisan voter resources. So if you go to our website, we have lots of fact sheets, checklists, toolkits, webinars, and other materials that can help you start or deepen a voter engagement strategy. And of course, the reason I'm here today is because we're the managing partner for National Voter Registration Day. So we started managing the day in 2017. And it's been great so far. So we'll dive into what that means for us. So what National Voter Registration Day is, if you haven't heard of it before, if you somehow missed us in 2018 on September 25th, it is a single day of coordinated media and field events to raise awareness of registration opportunities and register as many people as possible. It's a nonpartisan day of action, and that's very important to us, and it's important to our partners. So we are endorsed by the National Association of Secretaries of State and the National Association of State Election Directors. We've also gotten endorsements and resolutions actually recognizing the fourth Tuesday of September as National Voter Registration Day from the Election Assistance Commission and the Office of Election Officials. So we have broad support from the secretaries of state and the election directors who are running elections in towns, cities, and states all across the country. So National Voter Registration was actually founded in 2012, and it's held annually on the fourth Tuesday of September. In 2018, we had our biggest year to date, blowing 2016 even out of the water, which was a little unexpected. We had over 4,000 community partners register as partners on our website, and they helped to register or update the registrations of over 865,000 Americans. In 2019, our goals are to register 200,000 people, and we think we'll need the support of 3,000 partners to get there. And in 2020, our goals will be 1 million people registered on that date. So why sign up as a partner? Why am I here asking you all to sign up as partners for National Voter Registration Day? It was founded because millions of Americans don't vote each year simply because they missed the voter registration deadline in their state, or they didn't realize that their registration was out of date. Millions of Americans move every year, particularly lower income voters, younger voters, voters of color. So it's really important that we reach them and make sure they're registered so they can exercise their civic duty in November and really make their voices heard on the issues they care about. So this year, it's considered an off year in the election cycle. It's an odd year because there are a lot of municipal elections, but only a few states are having state elections. And obviously, there's no presidential election this year. So it has far less visibility. So it's really important that we do create that visibility to register people, reminding them that there are probably elections that they can vote for. I live in Somerville, Massachusetts, and so I know there are some school board elections. There is a challenger against our incumbent mayor. There are some elections happening, but you don't hear about it very much unless you pay really close attention like I do, because there's not that media saturation. But another way to think about it, even if you or the voters you work with just really aren't interested in that aspect, is this is the last big push to get voters registered ahead of the 2020 presidential primaries. Those start in February, and really, most of them happen in March, and they continue throughout the spring. But this is a really great time to make sure people are registered. A lot of people may not move or need or change their name or need to update their registration between September and February or March. So, this is a good day, a good time to do it. And lastly, it's fun. It's a really fun day to get involved with. There are media activations happening on major networks. There's, different apps like Snapchat and Twitter are doing things. There's, it's a nice moment in time where this really dominates the conversation. In 2018, it was the trending topic on Twitter all day, with the exception of like 2 hours of the day because there was a high-profile indictment. But other than that, like, this was the top trending topic. So it's fun to be part of that conversation. It's free to partner, and we will send you materials to help you get the word out about your event and provide a little swag to pass out. So when you sign up with this link, nationalvoterregistration.org/partner-2019-sign-up, if you go to this link and you sign up as a partner, just indicate how many voters you think you're going to register, and we'll send you posters and stickers. All right. So when you're planning your event, it's really important to know the rules. First of all, there are rules in every state about the registration drives, about training requirements, if any exist in your state. Texas is a well-known example of a state where to register voters, you need to be deputized. You also want to figure out where and how to obtain voter registration forms. Some states allow you to make photocopies of their forms. Others, you need to have original forms provided by the election office, and there are instructions on how to do that. And there's also, you also need to find out if you or how you can assist voters to handle incomplete forms. So in some states, you are allowed to actually hold the form in your hand and you write on that form and just ask the voter questions. And in other states, you're not supposed to make any mark on the form at all. So it's a lot of rules. They vary from state to state. Very confusing, except that we've figured that one out. We have these fact sheets that you can use. And so I'm going to actually see if I can switch my screen share so that you are seeing, let's see. Here we go. So I'm switching to my browser. So this is our partner tools page. Highly recommend it. And right over here, we have registration drive rules. So that's the link that's on that webinar. This is broken right now. I think that might be because, I don't know if that's because I'm screen sharing or because we've been updating some of those sheets. Those sheets are done with the campus election project and by Fair Election Center. So they are really experts at this, and they update these sheets for us. The other research and rules you really want to know about that are particular to your state are eligibility rules. For instance, can you pre-register 16 and 17-year-olds? What are the rules around voting as an ex-felon? Is there a certain kind of voter ID needed? In some states, there's ID needed in order to register, and in others, ID needed in order to cast the ballot. And you can also look up the rules around absentee and vote by mail. So if you encounter a voter who says, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to be here on November 5th, you can say, well, you can still vote, and this is how you can access an absentee ballot. And so we have on the Nonprofit Vote website a whole voting in your state portal that people really enjoy, and you can click on your state and it will pop up with all these different links to find the answers to these kinds of questions. So it's a nice shortcut for finding this information out. So once you've signed up and you know the rules, you want to think about partnerships. I really encourage groups to not go it alone and to really work in partnership with other organizations in their community. And National Voter Registration Day isn't restricted to just nonprofits. We have, obviously faith communities are a big part of National Voter Registration Day, as are libraries, campus groups, businesses, co-ops, huge number of partners, and a variety of types of partners. This graphic I have up shows some of our premier partners. So these are groups that have affiliates across the country that they are working to engage in National Voter Registration Day. So that includes APIA Vote, the Arab American Institute, League of Women Voters is, year after year a huge NVRD supporter and participant. Mi Familia Vota, the National Disability Rights Network, Students Learn, Students Vote do a huge activation, and they're part of the campus takeover. So they actually work to make sure that if there are multiple events happening on one campus, they are collaborating and working together. The National Urban League, YWCA, and United Way are also partners. And there are dozens of other partners. They're listed on our website. So that's a nice list to know that, these folks, if you have affiliate in your community, they probably have already heard about National Voter Registration Day, are being encouraged by their national org to participate. And so as you're developing partnerships, here's what I recommend in order to have a really strong partnership. First you want to identify who might be a good prospective partner. So in addition to these premier partners, you can also look at our 2018 annual report, and we have the full list of every partner that signed up. So you can you can find that on our website, and you can maybe say, well, oh, I wonder if this organization that we're interested in has participated in the past, and you can see if they've done some work before. Then you want to figure out what you are offering or what you're proposing for this partnership. One of the most helpful things, or two of the most helpful things you can provide, are volunteers and supplies. So volunteering might be interacting with voters, but it could be working with the election office to get those forms, helping to get those forms turned into the election office afterwards, helping with setup. There's a lot of different volunteer capacities that you can help fulfill. Also supplies. As I said, we offer the stickers and the posters, but tables, tablecloths, pens, clipboards, other forms of swag, food for the table, or candy to attract voters to the effort, are all supplies that you might be able to provide that would probably be really well received by a partner. So once you've figured out maybe your budget or what you can provide, what you have available to you, reach out, send them an email. You might want to forward the emails that you get from National Voter Registration Day once you've signed up as a partner, because we stay in touch with different webinars you can join, or updates of things that are happening. If you forward one of those emails, I do recommend to change the subject of the email so it's something more eye-catching for them. Last part of having a really great partnership is thanking them afterwards. Make sure you're showing your appreciation to all the organizations that you're working with on National Voter Registration Day. Everyone enjoys being recognized for their work. So when you have your partners together, you can do a lot of planning around what the event will actually look like. And so we have a bunch of tools for that. So on this page, we have our Field Toolkit, and that really takes you the step-by-step guide to planning, publicizing, and hosting your event. So tips on how to recruit volunteers, creating a run sheet so that you know exactly what's supposed to happen throughout the day. Lots of good guidance in here. We also are running a webinar on this on Thursday, and the recording will be available if you want to watch a webinar about that topic. So once it's all planned out, you get to the day of, you need to know how to talk with the voters. So we recommend active tabling. So you want to get out from behind the table. You want to be moving around, you know, have that clipboard and pen in your hand and approach people, you know, warm and friendly. Let them know what you're doing, remembering that it's completely nonpartisan. We ask that you focus on just registering folks to vote rather than any issues or campaigns that might be on your mind. This is a moment just for us to come together as Americans and people who can vote and express their voice at the polls. So identify yourself as a volunteer, explain what you're doing, and do this with everybody you see. Every person is a potential voter, unless you're pretty sure they're under 15 or under 18, depending on what the pre-registration rules in your state are. They might be an eligible voter. So talk to everyone and always make the ask. We recommend you just put the clipboard in their hand because a lot of people will just start filling it out. So while you want to approach it as, oh, we're just registering voters, if people are expressing some hesitation or they're like, why should I bother voting? You can connect it back to the issues that they care about. And how I would do this is, asking them, like, what are some problems in your community that you're facing around? Some common ones might be education, transportation, housing. Those are three pretty good ones. They also tend to be more nonpartisan than things like immigration or reproductive rights. So those are pretty easy to start a conversation about. And you don't need to ask them how they want to vote or who they're voting for, but you can just say, well, if these things are impacting you, you probably want to, learn more about the elections we're having and make sure that you're ready to vote either this November or vote in the primaries this spring. And really make that a conversation rather than, just a spiel where you're talking at people. We're all humans and we can really relate around this stuff. Of course, you're there to get them registered, so you want to make sure that the registration form is filled out properly. So the first thing is when you're asking, you want to make sure that they're saying yes, so that they do fill out that form. Instead of asking, are you registered to vote? Some people may think they're registered, may not want to admit that they're not. So we have some options here that might be a better way to ask people about registering, and this is what a lot of organizers we've talked to find are more effective. So did you know you have to update your registration every time you move, even if it's down the street? Let's check and make sure it's up to date. Or, our community needs more voters. Can you help out by updating your registration today? So that's like a quick, easy action item that they can do that's in support of their own community. Or, emphasizing the urgency and ease by letting them know that the deadline for voter registration is approaching and, do you have a couple minutes to make sure that you're registered? So once they have said yes, and, you've put that form in their hand, they're filling it out. When they give it back to you, before you let them leave, maybe just say, oh, let me just double check this real fast to make sure we've got everything. Here are the things that we see really common mistakes that you want to double check for. So at the top of basically every registration form, whether it's the federal form or your state's form or your county's form, there are 2 checkboxes. It's about, and they ask, like, are you a citizen of the United States, and will you be 18 by the time of the election? There might be a third one there that's, regarding pre-registration if they're 16 or 17. So make sure they've checked those 2 boxes. A lot of election offices will still accept the form if they can get in contact with the voter to verify those things. So that's why it is good to include the phone number on there. But some things that will easily get a registration form rejected are putting a P.O. box instead of a home address, where it asks for the home address, because it's about figuring out what ward or district a voter is in. So if they want to receive mail at a P.O. box, have them put that on the separate mailing address line. A lot of voters will accidentally put the day, that day's date, in the date of birth box. So just make sure it's, that it's not that day's date, that it's their date of birth. That's pretty easy because usually it'll start 19 something, and the last 2 numbers in the date shouldn't be 19. And lastly, a lot of folks forget to sign and date it. So just make sure that they've signed that form before they walk away so that you can submit it. So, here's my last slide. Just sign up to partner at nationalvoterregistrationday.org. So that is a fairly brief rundown of some of the things that you want to think about as you are planning a National Voter Registration Day activity. Some other things you'll want to pay attention to are promoting your event. We have a separate toolkit on communications, and our comms director has made it so easy for you. Sample tweets, sample press releases. It tells you when to send them. So we take a lot of work off of you in terms of how you can promote this so that folks know that you're doing this. If you're working in a community that has a lot of non-English speakers, you will want to go to in-language media and work with them to let them know about what you're doing. In-language media is very, very popular among non-English speaking communities. So you want to do a lot of promotion. If you're using volunteers or you're using staff, whoever is doing the voter registration, you'll want to cover the topics I just covered about talking to voters, how to ask about registering, and the forms, the form mistakes that we commonly see. You want to make sure that they know all that information as well so that they're doing this really well. And then the last thing, probably the most important thing, is making sure you fill out the survey that will come from National Voter Registration Day after your event, and letting us know how it went. Did we send you enough materials? Did you get them in time? How many voters did you register? How many staff or volunteers participated? General reflections on the day. It's really important that we get that feedback and that information because it tells us our impact. We really rely on those surveys to actually tally up how many voters were reached. In 2018, 200,000 of those voters were reached by the community partners, and not just people who saw the Google Doodle and updated their registration. So we really rely on those numbers, and it also helps us prepare for the next holiday and make it better and more suited to what our partners need, because this day is nothing without your participation. So that is something that we highly value. The last thing I'll mention is if you are in Tennessee, Florida, New York, California, or Texas, we have a mentor partner that we can connect you with that is an expert on voter registration and is there to provide deeper levels of support than our national team can provide. So I would say sign up, and if you are in one of those states, we will automatically connect you with that partner. So there may be some questions now.
All right, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Caitlin. And I know a few links were shared. Some states were just mentioned at the end. Those links, that list of states, how to sign up will all be in an email that comes, I'm pretty sure I can commit by the end of the week, along with a webinar recording. I love seeing, the note taking, but know that if you missed it, we will make sure you have that information. So thank you again, Caitlin. I think we'll open the call for Q&A. We're going to start with some questions that were submitted in advance and that I saw in the chat as Caitlin was presenting. If you have other questions, please do put them in the chat. I will, after we do maybe the first question, I'll share how to unmute ourselves just to make sure we can still have sort of a quiet environment. So the first question that kind of popped up actually in the chat that I think is relevant is, so thank you, Caitlin, for explaining where we can see past partners, but is there a way to see the events that happened in my community last year?
Is the question to see where they were held or who they were held by?
Sort of a both. So if I'm from San Antonio, can I look and see whether there was an event in San Antonio last year, and if there was, who planned it?
I think we have that information. I'm not sure that it's publicly available. Let me look into that, and I'll get back in touch with Faith with more information about 2018 events. Yeah, there is an event tool that people register their events on. So that's where we'd have our 2018, where I'd find our 2018 data, but our 2019 one is up. So you can register an event and make it easy for people to find yours and to see other ones happening in your community.
Thank you. Another question that came in ahead, and then I'll move to some I'm seeing on chat. And this was about Tennessee specifically, but I think it speaks to a bigger question, and that was about how in Tennessee, the voter registration form requires a social security number. So in that instance, and also generally, how do we give confidence to voters about the security of their information?
That's a great question. So most forms require just the last four of the social. I believe the federal form, it's just the last four, or the driver's license number. So one of the things that's laid out in the toolkit that I didn't mention is that you want to make sure you have a secure place to hold forms. Maybe that is a box or an envelope, and a person who's really responsible for keeping track of those, and again, making sure they get to the election office. We ask that they are turned over within 48 hours, so you can let people know that you signed an agreement to do that. So you would only have them in your, you'd only have them for 48 hours, and that you take it seriously, and that the voters' information won't be shared. Most states don't have a law against photocopying registration forms, and for Nonprofit Vote, we have a lot of our partners where they do copy registration forms so they can go back and do GOTV, or that's get out the vote with those voters they registered. But in general, we say you don't want to copy any of that sensitive information. So don't copy the driver's license number, the social, the date of birth. Really just stick to the forms of information that are absolutely required. So the name, the address if you're going to mail something, the phone number if you're going to call.
Thank you. Another question, this was sort of a two-parter that two different people asked on the chat. can we use this material on a different date? And if so, does National Voter Registration Day have poster art for registration on other days of the year?
So our focus is really on just that one day. You know, sometimes people will request materials and they'll hold an event on a different day. You know, we recognize that Tuesday isn't going to work for everyone. So you may request those materials. The stickers are not dated, so those don't say September 24th. The posters are. Of course, you could, you know, kind of cover up, you know, the date and put your own date on there. We don't have any materials for other dates, though we do have materials in other languages.
Thanks. And I would say for those of you with more specific kind of graphic needs or desires, send me an email, and you know, we have our comms department will do our best, in particular I think leading into 2020 when we'll be able to have a little bit more resources devoted to registering people to vote. But as Caitlin wisely pointed out, this is the last National Voter Registration Day before the primaries, so we will do our best. Another question that came in, and it's specific to California, but it impacts other states. So for states that have same-day registration, how has that impacted these registration drives?
I think a lot of folks, a lot of people may switch to doing pledge to vote drives in same-day voter registration states, but you know, part of it is the physical, like actually registering people so that they are able to vote. But even in these same-day registration states, I think, you know, it still makes sense to do a drive so that folks know that they're all set, they won't have to do that additional piece, and also just for the awareness raising part of it. So there may be slightly fewer, like somewhat fewer registrations actually coming in some of those states, but the organizers of the activities know that they haven't lost any relevance or importance.
Thank you. One last question that came ahead of time, and then I promise we'll move to right now. Someone said, how do I go and form kind of new partnerships or relationships with people that are less likely to be registered to vote? Any places you would recommend reaching out to, or maybe unlikely partners potentially?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, who in your community is doing maybe more grassroots work? Not all grassroots organizers focus on voter registration because they may be working with large populations of people who are not eligible to vote, you know, people who are immigrants and haven't been naturalized, for instance. So they could use the assistance there around that. Community, you know, housing development, CDCs, any sort of group that you know is serving, you know, people who are marginalized. They're often cash-strapped, resource-strapped, and could use your help. So that's why I really encourage, you know, thinking about what you can offer them rather than just saying, hey, will you help out? Will you be a partner? Campuses tend to be pretty well done. Like they don't need a lot of the support. So I'd really say going to local, you know, churches, other faith communities, shelters, and also businesses. That's another really interesting partner. We had a great one last year. It was a barber shop, and I think they were giving away, you know, free cuts on that day. So if you can find a business in your community and offer to provide, volunteers or assistants helping set up that drive, that is another great way. A grocery store, or even going to a bus stop.
Thank you. And I will just add to that, because Caitlin, as you were thinking, I was starting to brainstorm a little, that so many of our sections have thrift shops and school stores, especially this time of year. I think the back to school stores are already in full swing in some places, I'm aware. But you can, if your state allows it, and you know best the specifics of your community and state, but those might be great places to also ask people, not are you registered to vote, but have you moved recently, or there's an election coming up, do you know your registration status, that sort of thing. All right, so we went through most of the questions I got in advance, so I wanted to open it up. You all should be able to unmute yourselves. But if not, if you're having trouble, like I'm watching like a hawk here, either chat me or wave your hand if you can't unmute yourself and ask the question. And I'll do my best to pay attention. I'm not seeing any hand waving. Does anyone have any questions for Caitlin while we have her expertise? Okay. Caitlin, that means you were perfect. That's amazing. Thank you. And also, many thanks to the people who submitted questions ahead of time, of course. We'll go back and do one more question that came ahead of time that I thought was interesting, and it might be a little too specific, but we'll see. And it was about Florida. Oops, I just did something on my computer. It was about Florida in particular. And sorry, let me read it. So obviously we know Amendment 4 passed, but then the state legislature has been working to make it more difficult for that same pool of voters to actually register to vote. Is there anything special people should know with formerly incarcerated individuals regaining their right to vote, and how that plays into voter registration? Are there special questions to ask or information to know going into that? And it's relevant for Florida, but frankly, almost every state, thankfully, has at least some mechanism to let some people regain their right to vote. So it is relevant, yeah.
So we recommend people use restoreyourvote.org. It is a website that is established by the Campaign Legal Center. And because the voter registration and felony status is really complicated, because it's not just because you want to have like, okay, so this person has a record, to have they served all parts of their sentences, which Florida just decided, including all forms of restitution and fees. But then there's also, well, what state did they commit the felony in? Was it a federal offense? It can become very, very complicated. So this website, Restore Your Vote, is a great resource, and it takes people through all these different fields and tells them, generally what they believe their status is in terms of whether they should attempt to register or not. But it also provides a hotline and an email for folks who feel unsure, want more information, and need some additional help really understanding how their conviction impacts their status as a voter. Some states are pretty hawkish about voters registering when they are ineligible or voting, casting a ballot when it turns out they were ineligible, even though the only way that can happen is if there is some sort of error on the election office's part. Regardless, we don't want to get anyone in trouble, especially if this is someone who's already had to spend time to regain their freedom. So I really strongly recommend having restoreyourvote.org on your phone if you can, on a tablet, and available in the event that someone has questions.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? And if not, we'll close us out. I'm looking, my eagle eyes. I'm joking because I'm wearing glasses. I really can't see very well. Okay, so I know Teddy was having some issues, but Teddy, I see you on, so I'll turn it to you to close out, and we'll just, everyone, keep fingers crossed for Teddy's internet right now, and she'll close us out. Thank you all.
Great, thank you. Caitlin, thank you so much for your presentation about National Voter Registration Day. I was especially interested to learn that you had 4,000 partners and you helped register 865,000+ people last year. That's unbelievable. So thanks for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. And many thanks to everybody who participated in this webinar. I saw about 54 participants at one point, and for asking all of your questions. And thank you, Faith and Hannah, who sadly is out sick today, for coordinating today's webinar. September 24th now, as you know, is the last National Voter Registration Day before the presidential primaries begin this spring. These, as everybody on this call knows, how important these elections coming up are. And of course, the next national election, coming up in this November, but also in the national election in 2020. So the voter registration deadlines are coming fast. So I'm going to charge everybody on this webinar to go back to your sections, think about holding a voter registration event on September 24th, focus on building new partnerships or strengthening existing ones with organizations, especially that serve underrepresented communities. Also, provide voter registration forms and assistance at every event that you do, whether it's at a thrift store or back to school store, a fundraiser, whatever it is that you guys are doing, make sure there's information there. And let's celebrate another anniversary of the Voting Rights Act by committing ourselves to registering people to vote. So as I close out the webinar, please save the date for an exciting next webinar on abortion and voter suppression at 1:30 Eastern Time on August 21st. We will have the pleasure of learning from Jessica Pickney, Vice President of Government Affairs at In Our Own Voice, National Black Women's Reproductive Justice Agenda. And I think Faith alluded to this earlier, that following today's webinar, she'll send a recording and short evaluation on the call, and your feedback informs future calls, so please be sure to fill that out. And lastly, if you want to connect with Caitlin, or if you have additional questions, please contact Hannah at hcohensmith@ncjw.org. So thanks everybody again for joining us today, and I hope you all have a great day.